watch any of my videos before or anything like that?
No, I've what is it? I've been completely secluded from the outside world. You might be the only other person that I've spoken to other than my wife in the last 2 weeks.
You're just strictly drawn?
Yeah, like I've been putting a lot of hours into this, so yeah.
Is this the only book you're doing right now? Is the Fox and sorry if I'm butchering the name. It came from the woods,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
the
yeah.
fox came from the woods?
Yes, sir. That's my main focus these days. So
Nice. So you're just truly 100% dedicated to this project. So you're like I have artists that I feel bad, or it's not like I feel bad, but it's like it's very rare that I can get an artist that's just like 100% dedicated to my project because usually they have a lot going on. So it's kind of
mhm,
like, all right, I'm one of two projects they're working on. I might be the priority for a certain amount of time,
mhm.
but they're always taking other work. They might have, a cover they're doing or whatever. So for you to be just like, this is it, 100%. I guess, you know what? I until Daniel comes on. So I know virtually nothing about either one of you guys. So for
Mhm.
throughout this, I'm basically just gonna be like, have I'll start with you now, and I'll just be like, can you walk me through your career, your up until now, kind of whatever you want to share, and
Sure.
then
Yeah.
and then
Hmm.
I and this is kind of usually what I do for my calls is I'll sort of start off saying like, here's what I know about so and so and so and so, uh,
Hmm.
and uh, and then I'll be like, now you fill in the gaps. uh,
Sure. Sure.
and
Uh-huh.
then as that goes through, then I'll ask questions to be like, well, how did you get that job, or how did you meet this person, or how did that? Why do you think that one was so successful and this one wasn't? And questions like that. So it usually goes like that. But in the
Hmm.
case of you, it's like other than the Kickstarter page, I don't know anything about you. So the bio just says illustrator, game developer, or something like that.
Sure.
So
Sure.
if you want to
Yes.
just be like, all right, well,
Hmm.
let's take me back from when you would say you don't have to go like what got you into comics or what's like when you think like is a good step where you're like, all right, this is where I was like my career was officially I'm in the
Hmm.
game, you know.
Well, I was actually going to start with when my parents met, but I'll try to fast forward that a little bit forward. Yeah. I mean, it's really no surprise that the comic book world has not heard anything about us. We kind of came out of nowhere. I've been working in video games for the past, I want to say 10, 15 years or so. I mean, other than a comic book that I just made for fun about 10 years ago or so, this is really the first comic book project that I started working on. Uh, yeah, like for example, like Dan, our writer, like he's more of a movie director. The reason we even met was we worked together for one day in the advertising industry because they were looking for animators one day, and I just happened to live close by, so I just came into the office. Their office was, I think, 5 blocks from my house, and they just needed some quick help on animation, so I just came in. Um, if you so my by trade usually I'm a concept artist or an animator. When oh hey,
There he
it's an
is.
it's an orange cat. Of course he's acting the way that he
Yeah,
does.
he's a wild orange tabby.
uh yeah, so like what was it? I mean, usually I'm doing animation. This is my first real comic book project. I've been in love with comic books since, I don't know, like when I moved to Korea, when I first read Dragon Ball Z. Uh, I always wanted to do comics. I never had a chance to. I don't know if you've heard about what's going on in the video game industry right now, but it's a shit show. So this
I'm
was.
no,
Mhm.
not really. I'm starting to
Oh.
interview more people in the games, but that's what's crazy is more people are reaching out to me that come from the video game world that are
Hmm.
starting to get into comics or have been sort of in comics, but their main bread and butter. That's the thing is like what you're doing. Most people I talk to or that reach out to me, um, their main day job has been or is still storyboarders in Hollywood,
Mm-hmm.
game developers or writers, or uh, video game, like probably what you are, animators,
Mm-hmm.
concept artists, and then or filmmakers like Daniel,
Mm-hmm.
and screenwriters. Those are like the main things that people do. And I'll get a few other kind of randoms like UX designers or something like that, people that work more in tech
Sure,
that have
sure.
always been like interested in comics. And since they're doing animation and stuff like that, they're now starting to do, trying to break into the comic book world, which is where they end up finding me, either through YouTube or through the books I've written.
Mm-hmm.
Which, and what's funny is I just did a survey where I reached out to my audience and I was like, hey, I've got high level filmmakers coming on. I've got AAA game writers coming on. I've
Mm-hmm.
got classic celebrities in the comic book space coming on. And then I've got indie creators coming on. What are you more excited about? It was like 90% independent creators.
Oh, cool, cool,
And like
cool.
I
Yeah.
was like, dang, okay, uh, so for I would normally be like, okay, let's dive in a bit more into what got you into games and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to back up a little bit before to the comic stuff is basically what is it that what actually did you do for video games, like what does it actually consist of when your day job is an animator or a writer? Like, do you work for a company, or are you more like films to where you're kind of project to project, to where like you work on one game for a certain thing, or did you work for a company the whole time?
Uh-huh.
Or kind of fill me in, like the loose, 10 to 15 years, kind of what was that career like just in itself?
Sure. I'll answer it in a very winding and twisty way. So um there's a saying amongst artists that there's no middle class amongst artists. The video game industry was the first industry that really offered that to people who do art. Um, and when I first graduated college, and this was back in 2006, I actually graduated with a degree in illustration. And my first plan was, because I did a internship at Dark Horse Comics when I was in
Whoa,
college
okay.
still. This is way back when. Like I'm sure all the people that I worked with in 2006, I'm sure they're not there anymore. But um, my thought was that I would become an editor at Dark Horse. That didn't really pan out in the end. And I had a friend that was working at a small company at the time called Harmonix Music Systems Incorporated, working on a little game called Guitar Hero. And
Whoa.
yeah, I know. So, I mean, video games were like back in 2006, video games was still up and coming industry, and people, um, they had a high um, they had a high demand for artists at the time. Um, so I started working there, like I worked there for about 5 years, I think. And then I think I was looking back at my art career and I thought that I wanted to evolve to the next step. And I wasn't really getting what I was looking for at my job at the moment. So I just kind of quit and I just started doing painting for a while. And then from
What
there,
did you actually like? What were you actually doing as an artist there? Like, what would if what? I'm assuming it was sort of hourly. Like, what would you come in and be like, and they'd be like, "All right, this is what I've got to do today." Was it actually drawing on paper? Was it drawing on a computer? Like,
mhm.
what actually did that consist of? Like, and how many others were there working on this stuff?
So for Guitar Hero, when I first started, actually, when I first started working at Harmonix, I started in QA, which is quality assurance. I was a game tester, basically.
Oh, okay. So you didn't start off as an artist. I getcha.
Uh-huh. And then they were spooling up for a bigger project that they were working on called Rock Band, and they needed concept artists to do character turnarounds. So when I first started working as an artist at Harmonix, I was doing character designs, so drawing costumes and then sending it to the art director, getting them approved. and then doing something called the character turnaround. So I would draw the character from the front, the side, and the back, and then the
So
3D
they would send you
modeler.
like a script that says this is what we want it to look like, and then you would draw that essentially.
When I was working there, it was actually even more loosey goosey than that. Like they were just like just pitch ideas, and then we would
Okay.
just pitch ideas, and that was really fun. Just because there are no hard limits. I mean, the only hard limit was that it would have to look like a musician, and musician aesthetic is so wide and varying that um, it was barely like a barrier at all. So like I draw heavy, like it could go all the way up to like if you know bands like War.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, I was like, that's
Yeah,
so super. Like, you would just be like, if you just every time, just every character's like this with like metal hair or like
yeah,
war. Yeah,
mhm,
just totally like they look like monsters. And you're like, well, that's what band members look like. They're dressed
yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah. So like as long as there was some reference towards some existing band and their aesthetic, it would go through pretty easily. Sometimes their assignments would come down like, well, we just need like tattered jeans or something, and I would draw those. I mean, I worked there long enough. I did a short stint in the tech art department. For comic book people, that's a completely meaningless thing, and good, because it's a very difficult and satisfying career, but it's very boring to explain what that discipline is. I did 3D modeling for a while, and then and then
Okay, I
I
get
yeah, and then I quit for a while. I concentrated on my art. I don't know, I really wanted to come up with my own vision as an artist. Then I worked at a company called 38 Studios. If you
you.
remember
Dirty Eight?
38,
Oh,
38.
38. Sorry.
Yeah,
Okay. Oh,
yeah. That'd be a cool name, Dirty
yeah,
Eight.
yeah. I was thinking like, oh,
Mm.
that'd be they must be wild over at Dirty Eight.
Mm-mm-mm.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, this was back in Rhode Island. And yeah, I worked there for a while. Um, that time I was working in the I was on the web department, so I wasn't actually doing designs. I was more doing like web icons and stuff. And then I worked at Disney out in Seattle. They have an Disney interactive studio where I was doing like Marvel franchise Facebook games. Hey, it's Daniel. You're muted.
Always am. Sorry, I'm late. I'm very,
Hey,
very
no,
late.
you're not late. We just started early.
Mhm.
Okay. No, it's 35. I was on a, you can't get off the call. You're like, I need to get off this call, please. Can we end? And it just can't
Shut
happen.
up.
End it. You should have called me back sooner.
Well, I was just running through sort of his background in games and kind of have him go through his career up until the current moment. And then whenever
Mhm.
you came on, I was going to sort of do the same thing with you. But he was
All right. Well,
he started working for Disney. How long ago were you at Disney?
I think I
actually, I've
quit
never
that.
heard this. It sounds good.
Disney
Oh,
Interactive. It wasn't like the Disney California studio. I wasn't making like Treasure Island or anything. But yeah, I out here in Seattle, I I think I worked there until 2013. That's probably when I quit. And I tried to, make a go at making my own game, which I'm still working on. So if you guys like fighting
I'm intrigued.
games, yeah, if you guys like fighting games, check out Cerebral sometime. Um, and then yeah, I became a freelancer. I started, you know, working from home,
So
and
as a freelancer, as an animator or an illustrator or everything or a
a
game
little bit.
concept artist.
So I enjoy working for smaller studios, and the thing about smaller studios is that specialization is not as great of an option. So being able to do many different things is valued as a freelancer. So I could do animation, I could do concept art, I could do
How did you get those
production art.
gigs? Did you like go on did people reach out to you? Did you have like your own agency that you had a website? Did you go through LinkedIn?
A
This is
lot of
my
yeah.
whole channel is all about the nitty gritty of like the business
Hmm.
freelancing. and all that. So like this is where I'm gonna like dive into like, well, how are you getting these gigs, and what were you like? Were people finding you and being like, hey, this guy did that. Can you do this for
Mhm.
me? Did you meet up with people physically? Because obviously it was a similar story with how you met Daniel. So yeah,
Mhm.
can you fill me in a little bit
Yeah.
about like the freelancing world?
Yeah, a lot of the freelancing world is very similar to how I met Daniel, where there's a lot of personal connections that are made previous, and then in the future, you just kind of tap some shoulders and be like, "Hey, are you looking for someone who can do X, Y, or Z?" And then sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no.
Is this so?
Um,
This is in physical meet. So were you guys both? Where are you at now? Where you live in? What state or city?
I am in Seattle, Washington, and Daniel is in.
I'm in Ashland, Oregon, but right now I'm in LA. So, but I was living in Seattle, Washington when I first met
Okay, so you
Eliot.
guys met each other in person working as freelancers in Seattle, Washington, in entertainment loosely.
Yeah, I wasn't a freelancer at the time. I was a executive creative director at this place called World Famous. So we were doing a lot of T-Mobile commercials. I think that's what you were there for, right, Elliot, or was it something else? You weren't there for the Make a Wish project, right?
No,
Am I
we
right?
were working on some football thing.
Oh, some football. What was it? Was it the SEC thing, or was it the?
I think that was it. I remember it was we got introduced with each other through what is it? A mutual friend, Carl Nelson, because
Carl Nelson. Yeah, Carl's
yeah,
wonderful.
Carl and I, we used to do drink and draws every Thursday, and he told me that the ad agency that he was working at was looking for people who can do animation. So that's how we first met.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry to I cut you off, I think. Like I guess aside from like physical meetups, um, what other projects were you working on as a freelancer since like 2014 or so up until you meeting Daniel?
I did a quick stint at Epic Games. I did some of the Fortnite concepts, costume concepts there. I worked at a VR studio, and again, most of these opportunities that I ran into were because of people that I had met physically. A big part of getting work in the video game industry is the interview process, and the interview process can boil down to the company trying to figure out if you are insane or difficult to work with. And if you have someone on the inside telling people like, "Hey, this guy's cool, he's easy to work with," then that process becomes much easier.
I guess that makes
Yeah.
sense. So it's almost like it's not like in my mind with like for example like with comic books, it's just two of us working remotely essentially. It's not like
Mhm.
where if you work on a project like maybe a game or a film or a short film or a commercial or whatever where you got a whole team where you're all in one spot for a so then it's kind of like everyone there is now a part of your network. And if
Mhm.
everyone, recognizes that you're likable in some sense and skilled,
Mhm.
then you kind of can branch further. In the internet world, it's kind of like it's all word of internet mouth, which can be insane. And
Mhm.
it's not like we ever meet up or whatever. And so yeah, sometimes I get confused. Like, how are you meeting so many people physically? You go into happy hours or something amongst other illustrators, and I forget that it's like no, it's just normal life. But yeah,
No,
with
no,
like
no.
me,
Actually,
unless
I
I'm
would
going to
say,
Comic Cons or something, I'm
sorry
not
to cut
meeting
you
up with
off,
that many.
but yeah, a lot of it does actually have to do with the thing about networking. A lot of it does have to do with meeting people physically, um, because like through the facade of the internet, it's very easy to kind of fake your personality or not have the same kind of connection that you make physically. There's a lot of networking events happening here in Seattle, and a lot of people who start friendships and um, like professional relationships. And a lot of times the ones that are solidified through, you know, uh, like physical meeting, those are the ones that usually bear fruit. And because of that, a lot of people go to networking events and, like, yeah, take the
So,
opportunity to meet
so
people.
you did, yeah, go through some efforts to sort of like actually put yourself out there.
Well, yes and no, because I'm 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 terrible at socializing when I want something from someone. Like it, I come off like really I come off like a real fucking weirdo. Wait, can I swear here?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. If I want something from someone, I come off like a real fucking weirdo. So like, but most of these connections that I made, they weren't made because I was thinking of networking. They just happened to be my friends.
Yeah,
So
you're not going out there being like, all right, I need to sell my Kickstarter. And then you get to the party and you're like, I have books.
I was
Would you
like,
like
hey, have you
books?
heard of my pride? Like I'm really not good at that. So yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
how, what efforts did you take to build up your social media following? Because you have a pretty substantial, like, did you take any deliberate efforts or did you just sort of do what most people do where it's like, I just posted my stuff and I have a network and it just word of mouth grew? Or
it,
did you go through certain steps to try to build it up intentionally?
it was built up it's a like I hate to take the middle road, but it is a mixture of the two in that I had to make a deliberate decision to post twice a week. And if you post
Okay.
twice a week, yeah, like if there is any advice that professionals are trying to get from this, consistency is king. I do think that consistency beats quality if you're trying to build an audience. Like you could
That does bring me
you can kind
to
of suck. You can kind of suck, but if you are consistent, people will show up.
I know. There's
Consistently
plenty of
bad.
people that do that skill does win in the end. But that does bring me to your
Okay.
artwork.
I
Like
hope
what
that's true. Mhm.
we'll force
I
it to
think
be true.
Okay.
We'll will it into existence. It's
Sure, sure.
skill over hype every time. But so
I
I'm cheering
think
for
so
you.
far.
your current book is black and white, right?
Yes, sir.
And
Yes.
is your artwork, can you do almost any style you want, or is this book kind of like your unique, this is what you do, kind of this Eastern manga-esque style? Is that kind of like unique to, or like, is that what you would call like, this is my authentic voice as an artist, this is what comes out? Or were you guys deliberately trying to go after like, well, I'm gonna draw it like in this kind of Eastern style, but you normally draw in a different style? Because I haven't seen much of your art.
Mhm.
I wasn't sure how much it branched. Obviously, any good artist can do almost anything, or mimic any quote unquote
Sure.
like known
Mhm.
style. But I was just wondering, like the artists I've
So,
used, they
mhm.
have deliberately unique styles, and they always ask, like, do you want me to use my style or do you want me to go more do something different?
So the short answer is that this comic book is as close to my own style as I've worked professionally in my life. Um, Part of it has to do with the pace. If I were to try to emulate a house style, so to speak, I just I just couldn't make them this fast. So it is like this is my style. I mean, you are correct that in that, especially in the video game industry, a lot of my career has been spent trying to emulate what would be called a house style for whatever studio that I'm working for.
Yeah.
The professional goal of any artist, in my opinion, should be to try to um, make the line between their professional work and their personal work as thin as possible. And this comic book is the thinnest it's ever been.
Okay.
Okay. I gotcha.
I can answer some of this too. Is that I've worked with Elliot in a professional. I mean, this is also professional, but in the like we're both working in client work, and so in that process, you're just saying, oh, this is what I need it to look like. These are like they kind of it comes sort of baked in with the thing. I guess that's why I was asking if you're doing T-Mobile, because then we would be doing pink illustrations or magenta or whatever. So it's like it always has like it has the tinge of whatever your brand is that you're doing. But then Elliot had personal work that I responded much more to and had an idea that felt like, we talked about a few ideas into doing a comic together. And this one just sort of felt like, even along with what Elliot had been drawing, he also said certain basically buzzwords of like movies he liked or comics that he liked that made me say like, oh, I've got an idea that makes more sense with what I'm seeing with your work plus what you've said you really love, and that kind of like was one of the things that we were aiming for. So it's great to hear that it's in your style because that's sort of what the goal was. Like, oh, this is the thing you like to draw. This is already the stuff you like to do. Can we lean into like monsters and that kind of stuff to sort of have like a fun book?
So, have you, Daniel? Have you written comic scripts before and done? And have you had any comics published through the like traditional direct market, as they say, like through?
I've No, this is really like an experiment. I've had, I've been in advertising for most of my career. I just did a movie, but basically, I think one of the things early on, I'd wanted to be a comic book artist myself. Me and time don't get along well, and I just end up over laboring a page and overworking it or whatever. And I had one like really great meeting, like you go to a comic book convention and you show your work. And I had Dana Schultz at Dark Horse really responded to some pages I did. And I went home and I was like, I don't have time to do this. There's no way I'm ever going to get this done. And it was like the death of a comic dream for myself.
You got the job and you're
But
like, I
I think
can't do it.
I just can't do it.
I'm
It was
just
like
not
that.
good.
Well, it was just like the time. I don't know, for whatever it was. And I was young and I needed to make, you need to make a certain amount of money. And I was working in advertising. And I just started a business called Oh Hello. So basically I just didn't have the time, and so I kind of so it's something I tabled, and then basically as soon as COVID happened, I found myself really returning to comic books and like rereading them and kind of wanting to return to like the things that I had originally loved so much. Um, and that got me really excited about writing a comic book, and but also being honest with myself about needing an artist to come on board to like take it to the next level and partner with somebody and hopefully make something together. So that was sort of, I've never done it before, and then Elliot and I had talked about a comic, and then basically I started on the movie and just disappeared. And then after I shot it, I was like, I reached out to Elliot and saw what he was doing. And I said, oh, I have this idea. I know we talked about this like a year and a half ago. Would you still be interested
Yeah,
in
because
doing this?
this is our second attempt at making a comic together. Because we made a go at it, what, 2 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, like 2.5 years ago, something like that. It just wasn't the right project and the right time. And then and also again, I think one of the things I had a pre-baked idea, but having worked with Elliot on the other one and just sort of talking about the script, it felt like, oh, this is like this other idea that I had felt much more in line with what I thought would be a cooler comic to make with Elliot. Um, like it's like, oh, this seems more in line. We even had there's another idea. We had like three ideas that we've talked about that I'm very excited about, but Elliot like just like thinking and imagining. This was the one I was the most excited to see Elliot draw. Um, so it's just sort of like, and that just like we should just do it and see what happens. It could go bad, it could go poorly, but it seems like there's such a big thing on Kickstarter, and that process of like waiting for someone to say yes to your comic book, it seems like such a like you're just throwing it off into emails. I just don't know if I have. I know I don't have who's Todd McFarlane. I don't have like the 600,000 no submissions in me. I think I was just more like, let's just go make something, and if, hopefully someone will want to read it.
Oh no, that I get that. Well, you're one of those rare cases where you kind of have with Elliot an all-star sort of, both of your guys' professional backgrounds are pretty on point, and then the quality of the book is on point. So it'd be hard to sort of fail with that. Kind of no matter how if you guys took it to a publisher and you got no's, I feel like you still, or you wouldn't get no's from everybody. I feel like you get a few yeses and you'd be like having to determine like which, will I make more money on my own or will I make more money with a publisher? Because most of the time in this world, it's like if you're high quality and you have an audience of any form, there's gonna be a handful of publishers that will probably want to take you on, but you'll be at a weird dilemma to where they'll cover printing and all this stuff, but you might not make enough money with them because after the retail shops take their portion and they take their 50%, you would probably make more on your own with your own audience that you built up, because those publishers that take you on, their audiences alone aren't big enough to like counterbalance that cost, if that makes sense. Like they might have 5,000, steady readers, and maybe 1,000 of them will buy your like every book that they put out. But those 1,000
Yeah.
readers translate to dollars to you is not very much.
Yeah.
You might get more readers than you would if you just self-published blatantly. It's crazy. I'll also still find people that self-publish and don't crowdfund. They just straight up be like, I'm going straight to my website and I just funnel everybody there. They don't even do any kind of hype or nothing. They just got it on lock. Just this is my audience straight there. But that's people that have huge audiences that they don't even, like you, just have no time whatsoever. They're just like, it's done. Here you guys go. On to the next. Like don't have time to campaign. But so I guess I'll cut back to you, Daniel. Can you fill me in on like I was telling Elliot earlier, I know virtually nothing about you guys other than the Kickstarter page, but what briefly you guys put in your bios on that very professional Kickstarter page, by the way. Like I feel like after this campaign, if you guys collectively did more, I'm not sure how long you want the series to go, but this one would certainly grow. I feel like as long as the story content doesn't let people down to where they read it and they're like, oh, they lied. The interior art is actually not this artist. I've seen people do that. They'll straight up not finish the story with the same artist. And anyway, you'll be good and you'll be able to grow. But like, so on your background, I feel like if I went back to high school or all my high school friends and told them I made music videos for Portugal the Man and ODESZA, coolest kid, like they'd be like, oh man, he's just crushing it at life. Because those were like the legendary, like everyone loved those bands whenever I was in high school. I'm a millennial. I'm sure you guys we're all in the same boat there. And then plus, we'll do another video where I'll talk to you specifically because I also am in the movie world, low level, but we'll talk about your filmmaking stuff in a different video because I have so many questions. And apparently, like I was telling Elliot earlier, my audience doesn't care about filmmakers. Or I could have you explain the whole process. To me, that's mind blowing of how you got funding and how you did like the whole all that stuff and distribution. And my audience is just like, no, I want to hear about how like how do they raise their Kickstarter funds and what's their story about. But so yeah, if you could just give me like a brief rundown of your career in film and then how that branched into now with the comic books.
I'll be brief because if no one cares, I think I grew up really wanting to be into comics, and then I think maybe some point I realized I had more, like maybe just more talent at being a filmmaker than in a drawing. I just don't like Elliot. I think is amazing, but I don't think I have that kind of talent. I think I'm serviceable as a draftsman. I just don't think it's whatever. Anyways, so then that kind of got me started in design. So I started off in animation and design, doing that as a career for the longest time. I did main titles. I did this is where kind of the fun part for comic people is I did a title sequence for the TV show called House, which was directed by the pilot was directed by Bryan Singer, who I know has fallen into the negative side of public perception. But
hey, he still made The Usual Suspects.
And he made X2, and I was like so pumped. I was like, fuck yes, X2. This guy directed that, and I remember people be like, oh, I don't know. And then he came back and brought Superman before they changed the titles. There's a whole long story there, but like that was like that was a design job, and that sort of I did that for forever, and then it turned into directing and creative directing, and then.
So your break into film was basically doing the opening title sequence to House?
Well, it wasn't the break. I just sort of picked advertising in the way that like I think I had, I picked advertising. I'd seen a title sequence, like I was in college and someone had shown like a reel from this place called Digital Kitchen, and they did the titles for what's that movie? TV show. 6 Feet Under. And so that I was like, I watched that and I was like, I loved main titles, I loved that kind of thing. Beginning of Seven, all that shit. So I was just really excited about that. It's like, oh, that's a job.
Yeah,
I think
that's
I can do that. And I understand because if I'm kind of maybe I always just in my head I said it was because I loved comics was like, oh, type and picture. I understand how those work together and how like you can tell a story with both at the same time. It just felt like a natural place for me to begin. Or what I tried really hard to get that job. And then that was also, that you would basically do a main title, lose money, and then you would do commercial work, sort of like, so that's how the business made money.
Okay.
And that was just like so it was a fun job. But also I literally, like, I quit it because I went to Comic Con and I met a storyboard artist who had like a sketchbook, you know, and he had done a comic as well, and he had been working on The Incredibles, and I
The
was like, oh,
movie?
awesome, man,
The Pixar movie?
yeah, the movie, yeah, the
Okay.
Pixar movie, and I was like, oh
Yeah.
my god, that movie's the best. You must love it. And he was like so unimpressed and nonplussed by the work, and I was like, oh, so if this is like a job, no matter what, like, you still at some point it just becomes someone's job. It's like you did the best animated movie ever made, and you're like, fuck it, dude. And I was like, oh, you act like me. I'm
It
working on
was a
AT&T commercials,
job.
and you're acting like me. He's like, oh, whatever, man. And I was like, okay, dude, if it's a bummer to do something great, then I don't know what I'm doing. Anyway, so I have just been in commercials for the longest time, and I got to do some music videos. Again, the same thing. I was really excited to do music videos. That's a weird business, and there's not a ton of money in it. But it's fun. It's like really exciting work, and it's like fun. ODESZA was fun. It's fun to do those things, where you get to go and
Did
you
you
get to go
have your own
backstage
like
sometimes.
your own business at this point? Like, how were you,
So,
or were you
yeah,
working
so
for somebody that was getting
I
you all
started,
these
so I
gigs?
started so it's I have like a weird. I'm trying to make this short, and I think I'm
No,
making it
you don't
weird.
have
But
to like,
it's okay.
like super narrow it.
No, no.
My
I had
audience
a
will listen
business.
to it all.
I started a business when I was 25. So I can give anyone good advice on, like, don't start a business at 25 with friends and give yourselves like the worst contract ever. Like, our contract like let us like totally like, oh, we could work for anybody else at the same time we had a business, which is fine and well and good. But as soon as, like, if you start making money and people start wanting to go different ways, and you're
That's
like
that's what I try
basically
to.
I
Everything changes when you start to make money. Like it's
as soon as you make
when you don't, you're just kind
money.
of like, and then you start to, and then everything changes, and like, yeah, then you realize like, oh, I did everything backwards. Sorry, keep
I
going.
did this all wrong. No, that's 100% right though. And I think so. Basically, I did that. I started a little graphics business that then turned into me directing commercials and stuff like that. But the background was in animation, and also like I'd wanted to do some 2D animation, which I really love. But there wasn't, like, at the design company, that wasn't something that they were really big on. They wanted to just sort of stick to a niche of main titles or whatever. So um, I started a little business. Me and my partners went our separate ways, and then I've just been doing creative directing and like commercial directing and music video directing until then. Really, until, like I said, until COVID, I was just sort of always doing the same kind of thing. I wanted to be a filmmaker. I did a short film. We can talk later about my own film, but I did a short film of it, um, and that had gone really well. But it ended up not knowing how, like, Hollywood works and like how to have like a short that then was a movie. I just didn't have any of that stuff prepared. So it was like
Oh,
I had like a viral short, and so I went and took a bunch of meetings, but I didn't want to make a feature out of it. So at that point, it was sort of like a pointless endeavor. You know what I mean? Like,
why didn't you want to make a feature
you
out of
know,
it?
in the short, everyone meets a pretty grisly end in the short, and I didn't feel like that made sense as a movie. You know what I mean? It was a short. Like,
Oh,
it
okay.
had like,
Creatively, or
you
like
know what I
this.
mean? Like,
Yep.
just
See,
to say there's not a movie here. This is like, be smart. I would always say, have a plan. That
yeah,
makes sense
always be
down the road,
open
probably.
ended. I feel like, yeah,
Yeah.
like I had meetings that were like the same thing where I'm just like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And yeah, and then they're like, but no, that's how it ends. Like, it's you kill your main character. I'm like, well, yeah, that's like they're like, no, they gotta fall in love.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, oh, I forgot. And yeah, and then like later I guess you could say like my mentor was just like, you just say go, like yes, yes to everything. Like, yeah, they can do whatever they want. Like, just stop trying to like make up like what you think the way things anyway, sorry. I could talk forever
No, that's all.
about the movie stuff, and I'm not saying don't go
Yeah.
dive into this stuff now. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
I love it so much that I will make a whole separate interview where I'll talk to you just about from start to finish our lucky day, because creating an
Okay.
independent film is such an endeavor. But I
Yeah.
don't want you to think that like just not to talk about it, anything at all or anything like that. But I could
Totally.
riff back
I
and
mean, I
forth
think
about all this stuff.
totally. I think the big thing for me was I do love comic books, and I've always loved it as a medium, and it's really like a wonderful storytelling device. Something, you know, it's just something I love. So I think the desire was there just to make something and not to do it in the, you know, I think I know now it seems like there's a lot of comic books when you like have some success in another field, they're like, hey, why don't you go write this now? Or like there's just like all these guest writers or musicians or whatever. There seems like a whole like subcategory of famous people or people from another industry who come in and
Yeah,
they make
yeah.
comics. And I really didn't want to be that either, or like to like lose credibility as a comic book creator. Because I know some people, you know, they treat them as like IP generators. And I think our goal with this comic is really just to make a great comic, and hopefully it's like a fun read, really inspired. You know, you brought up that it was a black and white comic book, and that was one of the things that Elliot and I have discussed really at depth is like how much we love black and white comic books as like a medium. And it's like I'd be interested to see how like American audiences feel about that. But I feel like there's something really fascinating about black and white as like the way we connect to it and the way we read comic books specifically. I could talk about this for too much, but I think there's like I don't know. I feel like there's something about black and white and comics where I think when it's in color, like you read it more like illustration and less like a story.
Okay.
And something about black and white kind of like just sort of, I don't know what it is, but
No,
I
I
think of like
totally
my
get
favorite.
you. I wanted to dive into both of you into this because right now, from a story perspective, marketing perspective, indie comics whole industry perspective, everything since I'm not saying like you guys are new to this space. I consider myself somewhat new to this space, but I've been
Yeah,
in it for long enough to where you'll learn that there's different subgroups of every part of this industry, especially when it comes to the people reading mainstream comics, like people that read Marvel and DC every Wednesday, they pick up new books. That's their own crowd, and it's virtually separate most of the time from everything else of what we call the indie space. And in the indie
yeah,
space, there are some people that only really read mainstream indies, and they think books done by Dark Horse and Image are somewhat like the lesser known. They think they're diving deep into the bargain basement weird stuff. And then there's other
yeah,
people, there's a huge space that's growing every year. Like you can look at the numbers, Kickstarter alone and Indiegogo, you know, it's gone from, I want to say like since 2016 up until today, it progressively growing to where millions more dollars are funded into comics, more readers are getting into them. And not only
why
that,
do
but
you think
just
that's happening?
there's a lot of different reasons. And a lot of the people I bring on here will go into what they see, but a lot of this is all up for debate and discussion. But the whole big mainstream argument is there's people that see it as like a culture war thing, and comics is sort of the ground base of not just comics but video games and virtually anywhere where IP might start. That then eventually, if you
yeah,
think of where it grows, ultimately would be TV shows, film franchises, and ultimately theme parks, merchandise. Like the as IP
right,
grows into a phenomenon, where it
yeah,
starts is usually just comic books and or anyway, but books in general. And so the people that are in this community, they see that as like we are the seeds to what spins the world around. And that like that then if you grasp that worldwide, there is also the manga side of this thing. And the manga side is massive because there's so much more people over in the East. So it's just
yeah,
like you imagine web comics, webtoon, and manga overseas. Like it is a behemoth. It almost in itself, like just manga alone, can over trump even the U.S. entertainment machine. It's just that
yeah,
big as far as consumers. And I think here in the West, you get like people that are really adamant about sort of idolizing the Eastern anime shows and manga, and that is almost seen as a superior medium, even though because it's more in the same sense that you see like the Japanese building their houses without nails and stuff like that, where it's just a pure art form. Like it's just back to the most like just only it takes ancient skills and knowledge to be able to do something so perfect. In the same sense that some see manga in the same light. I'm exaggerating for fun, but like in sort of like that. So then you take that combined with sort of culture wars, we're the thing that matters in the world, and there's this whole new thing that's growing in the West. And where does it all come to? Kickstarter and indie comics in general, mixed with people being able to, the barrier to entry is zero. Like you can literally draw on paper, scan it with your phone, and ultimately, make comic books professionally in a sense with not that much effort. Like, I mean, it takes serious
It's
effort
effort.
as
No,
we
but
all know, but it's not like it takes, you don't need to pull funding you don't need to try to act, although crowdfunding is required. Like there are some who truly do need to raise 3 grand to get started or something like that. But from a general sense, like you can get started completely on your own and slowly grow by growing your audience online, by, progressively reaching one issue at a time and so on. So like that combined with like kind of anybody can do it, and you can kind of quickly get onto the same playing field as are the biggest idols in the world if you want to go there.
I
And now
think
that's where like I come into play, is because I can actually show people how to get there. How do you go from zero to being able to work with someone as powerful and influential as like Kim Jong-ji, who I've worked with, or Shintaro Kago, and things like that. And people from all over the world, and just the internet has made it easier. Which I don't want to talk forever, but that reminded me. Didn't you say, Elliot, you lived in South Korea for a while?
I did. I lived in South Korea for about 7 years,
Do you
from
want to
second
fill us
grade to
in
ninth
on
grade.
like what's the comic world over there like at all? Like how big are webtoons? Because I think
Sure.
like that's kind of the
I
main hub.
will. I just wanted to, like, before I get into that, I just wanted to make a comment that of the entertainment industries, the comic book industry does seem to have the closest connection to what one could call the everyday man. So Hollywood is so separate, it's so distant from, I don't know, like a working class person, that a lot of people probably feel like they have no influence on what happens in movies. Whereas I think part of the reason that comics became such a culture war thing is because like the startup for doing a comic, like you said, maybe $3,000, like an artist and a writer. Or maybe if you're you're like one of those lone geniuses who can do both, it might just take one person to just start a thing, and it's the first testing ground, because we saw how the MCU happened. Like it's the first testing ground to see how far up in the cultural chain you can go. Like books
Yeah.
are very dense. Like not a lot of, like, especially nowadays, like not a whole lot of people read. So, and it's very difficult. It's the reader actually has to, put a lot of effort into actually reading. Whereas comics are like this nice middle ground. Like the pictures help assist the reading, and like it's a more passive experience than books are. And
Yeah.
to answer your question about South Korea, what it's like, I mean, on the one hand, I haven't lived in Korea in about 20 years. Like, I mean, I left Korea in 1998, so I haven't lived there in 25 years or so. But with that said, I mean, even like sorry, my cat's being a cat. Uh, what is it? I pay loose attention to South Korean pop culture, and I will say that webtoons are famous enough that even back in the 2010s or so, like there were talk shows where webtoons artists would come on, and they would be personalities instead of just and they wouldn't even show like a single page or drawing of those comics. It wasn't, they were just kind of celebrities. And what is it? I think
Nowadays, they're real celebrities.
oh,
Like I see, yeah.
I'm certain, like to the point. Well, especially with you, like I'm talking about back in the day when like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was still like 12 broadcasting companies that basically just was all the channels in Korea. Like they would still have artists and writers come on talk shows, and they were treated as celebrities. Now with YouTube and internet media being a thing, yeah, a lot of webtoon and comic book artists, they have almost two careers, one as writers or artists, but also as internet personalities, because their work is so sought after.
Did people, I would hear stories about back in the day of even nowadays where in, the train from Seoul to Busan or whatever, people are just reading comics and just throwing them on the ground because they're so common that it's not considered like here where all comics are collectibles essentially. They're not throwaway, but still over in the East, they're still treated that way. Did you ever see like anything like that? Like where they're just so common that they're almost just like
Sure.
trash?
I mean, so Korea's comic book culture is very similar to Japan's comic book culture. And in that, the physical printed media, there are a lot of similarities like that. I mean, I remember when I was growing up in Korea, whenever I went to the barber shop to get my haircut, they would just have a stack of monthlies there. And the monthlies in Korea, very much like in Japan, are very different from the way that they are in America. In America, you get monthlies, and you're getting, what was it, 22 to 35 page little slim books. Whereas, because comic books are mostly black and white and printed on newsprint in Korea and Japan, you're getting like 1,200 page like big phone books, and they usually sold for like $2 to $3. They were very disposable. They weren't very collectible because they wouldn't even last that long, and they were all over the place. With that said, uh, and this is more so in Japan than it is in Korea, there is a very hardcore collectors market. So a lot of the same practices that you see here in America exist in Japan, a little bit in Korea, but not as much. So a lot of times they will buy multiple issues of the same comic book because they want to read one and they want to save one, and then maybe let their friend borrow one.
Gotcha. So there is still a collectibles market, but yeah, it's definitely like that's actually an argument that people are making now where they see the comic industry would actually grow a lot better if we just adopted like a more Eastern approach in the sense of how we physically sell them, to where if we actually sold books not like as what are they call it, something like a tabankan or
No, it's like that.
something like that, the actual like thick square like manga style
In
actually like
yeah,
booklets.
in
uh
Japan they would call it tankobons. In Korea
Tankabon,
we would
yeah.
call them tanenbon. Yeah.
So if we adopted that and actually sold them in bookstores and actually sold them in more places, that there's a lot of people that feel that it would be cheaper. Go ahead.
I have a conspiracy theory, and I would like to
I'm
possibly
all
run this
I
ears.
by
love
you and see. I actually think that, and I have very little to no evidence to back this up, but I actually think that Diamond Distribution is probably what is destroying American comics, and not no one's really talking about it. Number one, because they have a complete monopoly on the distribution of comics, and a lot of the comics, especially indie comics that do succeed, work outside of the Diamond Distribution network, and they are sold in like Barnes and Noble when Barnes and Noble was around, or normal bookstores instead of specialty comic book stores. So even before changing the format of like turning them into tankopons, I mean, part of it does have to do with the fact that color comics just take far longer than black and white comics to make, and the economic reach of them are much smaller, because you get like 120 page like collectible graphic novel. that's like 15, $20. Whereas in
Yeah.
Asia, like especially where I grew up in Korea, which was even cheaper than Japan, like when I was growing up, like a 240-page tankopon or danenbon was $2. It was very, very
Good old
achievable
days.
for an elementary school kid to just like, oh, like my mom didn't give me money to buy a comic. I just had $2 and I just went and bought it at the corner store, not a specialty comic book store, just a store that sells what do you call it? Like a stationery. Like stationery stores will sell comic books in Korea.
Is it
Yeah.
this might be diving too much into the weeds, but and it shows how little I actually know about all this, but it's like with the way like manga is sort of their rating system, I guess, so to speak. I've talked to a lot of people to where they're just like the culture is so much different over there in both Korea and Japan that it's just not uncommon for you to basically be reading or just like sort of R-rated material was not considered unusual for even someone that's like preteens to be reading. And so like sexualized material wasn't that considered, like parents weren't like I had people that they weren't allowed to read graphic novels because their parents just heard the term graphic and were like, what is that? That means it's probably horrific. And whenever I was a kid, I want to say like 12 years old, and I went to Barnes and Noble, I was immediately gravitated to like Hellraiser. And I tried to convince my
Yeah.
parents, like, I want to get this. Like this.
Mhm.
It's like
Not so bad,
this
right?
this lady is naked and people are
Mhm.
being tortured. And I was just like, this is what I want. And they're like, no. And but
So, mhm.
it's not, I've just heard like it's just not that taboo over there. And so that has made it even more mainstream because it's just sort of, I don't know if it's just like how, I don't
I
know what I'm
will,
asking.
I'll be able to answer this by not directly, but by describing the cultural differences between Japan and Korea, especially in the 90s. Like, I don't know what it, like, again, I haven't lived in Korea in like 25 years, so I don't know what the kids are like anymore in Korea, especially after the internet age.
Well, I watch their shows and they're wild.
They are like in a lot of ways, Korea is like an amplified version of America. A lot of things that like they're more polite, I will say that in Korea, but
It's
a
very
lot of media
social
criticism,
as well.
yeah, social media, but also like a lot of
I
media
meant more like a
criticism.
social. Sorry.
No, no, no.
Oh, I just mean like a social people like Japan. I shot in Korea, and because Japan feels like a very singular society. Like there's lots of like single serving places you can go in by yourself. It's like almost designed for you to be alone in Japan, and everything in
Sure.
Korea is like supposed to be experienced as a social setting. You sit down at a table, and they don't really know what to do
Yeah,
with you if it's one person.
that's
It's
true.
like there's supposed to be like six friends there. Like anytime you go out to eat, you cook together. Like it's just like a. I was just sort of sorry.
That's yeah,
I'm
yeah,
jumping in where
yeah.
not
No, you're not incorrect on that. I think that is probably a big cultural difference between Korea and Japan. But well, one of the points that I was trying to make was that a lot of media like criticisms of American culture you can very easily lay on Korea as well, and it's actually a lot of times much worse in Korea than it is in America. I think that does have to do with the fact of like a post World War II relationship between America and Korea and America and Japan, whereas Japan in a certain way was far more secluded from the West, whereas like because of military bases in Korea and a lot of military ties between Korea and America, there were a lot of cultural swings that Korea and America made in the same direction. Granted, Korea does have a far stronger like conservative bent as far as culture goes. Just thinking about like how politeness works or respect of elders are slightly different between America and Korea, but even stuff where comic books were because a lot of comic books in Korea were imported from Japan, but when they were imported, they weren't imported directly because if you know a little bit about world about history of that region, Korea used to be they used to be what's the word I'm looking for? Um,
Enemies?
Communist?
No. Korea used not owned, but they were a
Oh, independent or
not.
self-sovereign or
What's the opposite of that?
they were
Oh, like
occupied by a
They were
different.
occupied. Yeah, Korea was occupied by Japan. So
Okay,
Korea,
okay.
Korea has this big kind of like inferiority complex. That's a little harsh to put it that way,
I get what
but
you're saying though. Yeah, okay.
yeah, they very much want to
Yeah.
be independent
Some
of
baggage there.
influence from Japan. There's a lot of baggage. Thank you. That's the perfect way of putting it.
Gotcha.
But
Yeah,
because
yeah. Because they have a much more intense history over a long time horizon of being okay. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I
Basically starting in the pre-World War II era, like I think Korea got taken by Japan in the 1920s or 1930s or something like that. Doesn't matter. Like what I'm trying to get at is when they brought in comics from Japan to Korea, Koreans loved it, but there was a layer of censorship that came with it. So a lot of sexualization and violence was actually censored in the imported comics into Korea.
oh, okay.
Right. And because so Japan's culture traditionally they had a much um I don't want to say liberal view on sex, but they were far more comfortable with nudity than like a post World War II Korea was. And also, one thing to remember is that post World War II Korea became very, very Christian very, very quickly. And a lot of views on nudity in Korea from before that time during the Confucian era changed rapidly once Christianity took over as the dominant religion there. So a lot of times when comic books were imported from Japan into Korea, a lot of times they would draw like bras on top of nude bodies, or like they would, you know, censor
Oh,
out a lot of the
Yeah.
violence and
I
stuff
bet I
like
could
that.
find someone who that was their job. I bet I can find someone online and interview and be like, "Your job was the guy that draws bras on Manga from
Exactly.
Japan."
Yeah. There's a
Well, this thing,
fascinating history between cultural exchanges between Korea and Japan. I
I,
will
I
say
dang, that's
that
wild.
despite a lot of historical animosities, cultural exports such as this is probably the main driving force of unity between the two cultures.
Huh. I, yeah, dang it. Now I'm fascinated and I want to look more into it because that's like I was in Korea. I visited at one point I was going to Thailand for a full moon party and I had a layover or like I got a cheaper ticket to start in South Korea, so I spent a few days in South Korea and I was like, this is the greatest place on earth.
oh, it's
I
good.
was there during Halloween. I landed
Mhm.
in Seoul
Ooh.
and the hostel I stayed at, the employees that worked there, they like were like, your room's ready. And like straight out of the movies, they're like, and now we're gonna show you around on the town. Like they were just like, that wasn't their job. They were just like, we're off work, so and they were all female, and they were from all over the world.
That's a good one.
And so they're like, we're gonna go out, and then it was like Halloween, so it was like people were like filming everywhere, and you could drink on the streets, and it was like straight up Mardi Gras, New Orleans, and like,
Mhm.
I didn't realize at the time, but like, yeah, I guess plastic surgery is very common over there, so like everyone's great looking.
Mhm.
And you're just like, what is this place? And I
Mhm.
had never really been to a city that big before at the time. Like
Mhm.
Yeah.
people don't realize that, we think New York is big with
Huge.
like 20 million. You go to places like Seoul, this is like twice the size of New York, sort of. Like, and it's just an endless, like almost futuristic looking city, and you can drink on the streets and there's street food. It's almost like the ultimate like dream life to where it's just like I'm in a place you could just like Grand Theft Auto everywhere, just walk into whatever, just like. So I was like, whenever I had to leave and then go to Thailand, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to go back.
I've lived
And then I
in
went back
Seoul.
to
Mhm.
Busan, and
Mm.
it was like still a great time. But I remember thinking like this is totally different because then I was like going into it was like mostly like older people and I was like, wow, it's just like this is a whole another world to where it's
I've
just like you can see
I,
so much different in such a small area, you know?
I've lived in Seoul for 7 years, and I'm convinced that I've seen 1% of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what was wild is like you see like this never ending kind of like cityscape, and then you can go to another place where it's just like a national park where you're just like, you took like one train ride and now you're in like sort of a whole nother different kind of world.
Yeah.
And I was
Mhm.
anyway, anybody that like does
What
international
is it like?
travel for the first time, I feel like they're going to be mind blown no matter where they go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I think like
Absolutely.
80% of South Korea is in Seoul though. Like it's all constant. Like the majority of the population is in Seoul. It's like that.
Oh yeah,
Definitely.
it's a big problem in Korea because very similar to like I was saying before, like a lot of America's problems are Korea's problems. There's a big problem with agriculture in Korea where the average age of a farmer in Korea is like
Yeah.
something absurd, like 65 or 70 or something like that. And
Oh wow.
yeah, it's yeah.
Now we
I
can
love
talk about the
Korea.
end
I
of the
love
world.
Korea so much, but that country has a ton of problems.
Yeah.
Uh,
I wonder
I could
on the
say the
same
same about
subject. I do
US.
wonder about like
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. I wonder how like in Japan too they do censor things. So I wonder if like some of that stuff just you wouldn't see on the page anyways. It doesn't
That's
in
what
the
I've
same
always thought was
way.
so weird is like things that we don't censor here at all, like
They censor it all over the
pornography or
place. Yeah.
whatever, they'll censor there. But at the same time, their teenage books are filled with, you know,
I just
like,
wonder if I wonder if they're like censored too. They're like so they draw it, but it's just censored so like the kids can't see it anyway. So it's sort of like in that sense of you won't see it anyways. Like it's they're just putting it in there because you can't see it. So
they
I wonder
might
if that's
censor it for artistic purposes, but some of that stuff's not censored at all.
I was like,
I remember going into
So,
bookstores whenever I was younger and being like,
mhm.
there's no way that like I can bring this home with me.
So
yeah,
there's a fascinating battle happening in Japan in particular when it comes to that kind of stuff because on the one hand, their mass media is far more liberal, let's say, whereas their explicit material is censored. So the best way to understand it, at least the way that I understand it, is that there's a battle between the government with their what is it, decency laws, but also
hmm
the organized crime, the yakuza in Japan, because they, at least before, they had completely owned the entertainment industry. So the
yeah,
yakuza is always trying to push it more towards what they can sell, what the people want, and the government with their decency laws trying to tamp it down. So it's not like a flat battle. It's like an arrangement of certain things, like certain one side wins one thing and the other side wins another thing. That's why it's such a odd
Oh,
collection of things.
government versus
that makes sense.
mafia. I'm sure it's like that everywhere, and we're all gonna we're all like I feel like that's what the past couple of years we're slowly realizing just how much of that the whole world is
It's
basically
everywhere.
mafia versus mafia.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
to jump back to the your guys' specific book, I the last part I was gonna get at about the black and white aspect of it is I'm currently working on a book that's somewhat same genre loosely. It's black and white manga style with an anonymous artist, which um unlike you, she will never show their face. Like they're anonymous forever. And like so
Yeah.
their name is a pen name. Uh so but also like you, pretty large following. Um, and we're now debating like kind of like I was saying with you guys, where it's like, do I want to go with a publisher that might not be worth it? Do I want to just go ahead and kickstart it? And the reason I bring this up is these are not as common of comic books that people like in the general sense. It's like kind of the most popular books, at least for the past couple of years on Kickstarter, have been either politically motivated, and
hmm
doesn't matter if they're black and white, doesn't matter whatever, but usually they are a very common American style. To me, it's not that unique or intriguing, but it's a very familiar style. Um,
Yeah.
and or other than that, it's been very like kind of extreme taboo subjects that are like not safe for work, subjects that are like kind of sexy superheroes, or just generally
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
sexualized material or stuff
We're
that's
seeing
about
it.
like weed
the
or
the
whatever.
perverts,
Yeah.
they own this space.
Yeah. But Oh, and then beyond that, it's like you have to get very genre specific, and you have to have a following, and it's just like you have to get with your sci-fi fans, get with your horror fans or whatever. And so like with you guys, seeing that you guys are your goal is uh 10 grand, your base goal, right?
Oh,
Oh no,
our base
our
goal is
base goal is
low.
Oh, your
two and a
base goal is
half.
Yeah,
like
we have a low base,
oh, okay. So
4,500.
you
But that's
surpassed
sort
your
of
goal already, right?
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
yeah.
Where
We have
did
a
you
low
guys
base goal.
where do you
Yeah,
think you guys, or you can probably see on Kickstarter, like where are you pulling your fans from? Like how much are from Elliot, how much are from you, Daniel, and how much are like organically from Kickstarter?
Kickstarter.
A
It's a great
shocking
question.
amount of it is actually from Kickstarter.
That's
Like a
awesome to
surprise,
Yeah,
hear.
like
that's
yeah, I never would have guessed, but especially after our first campaign, I was shocked to see that like the organic traffic from Kickstarter was probably what like 50% or something like that. It
How
was
yeah.
a
much
surprising amount.
how much effort did you
Yeah.
take to try to pull from your own fans? Like did you, other than just posting on your social media, do you guys have either one or both have like an email list? Did you do any paid advertisements or anything like that?
You can do you
We,
can do paid advertising.
You can, not
we,
directly through
I,
Kickstarter, but Facebook, Google, YouTube.
we are doing. I am doing. I've been. This is the first time we've done it because this is our third one. I am running a very cheap Instagram ad at the same time, so we're seeing how that goes. Um, I think it's doing something. I don't know. It's been, but it's very like low per day just to
No,
sort of
yeah,
see.
yeah.
And it's definitely like it's like you do it and you turn it off, and you do it and you turn it off, and like I'm trying to see if what's making an impact. It's like so we're just trying. I'm honestly, we're just trying stuff. Like it's been an interesting we've done some partnerships with other art illustrators and cover artists just to sort of see how that goes. Who do we like? Who's like audience really kind of connects with what we're doing? It's been like I think a big kind of question. I was kind of curious like who's gonna pull in, who's gonna want to read the comic based off of whatever
Do
else is
you,
out there.
Max,
So I think that's
Max,
been
you've done this for longer than we have, and we hear some random rumblings about people have a certain feeling about guest cover artists and whatnot. I mean, for us, like our guest cover artists, a lot of times brings a lot of traffic to our campaigns. Like, well, what's the situation there?
yeah, go for it. Variant cover artists, this whole space, what brings the value to a lot of this stuff is that people do like specific artists. They like trending artists. There's a lot of collectability to this stuff. So a lot of the people that are reading
yeah
this stuff, they're not just readers, they are collectors. They collect them for themselves because they love it. They collect them because they can ultimately sell it, and they get attached to certain artists. So if you're going to use a variant cover artist, what people don't like is what about variant covers and art. It's not so much in the Kickstarter space, although that people will hate on it there too. But what they're hating on is not the artists themselves or the act that you might have variant cover artists. What they're hating on is the fact that that is overshadowed everything else in this industry, and then that's the only thing that's holding it afloat. Because most of the time in
yeah
the mainstream direct market, what is keeping these companies alive is the collectability of variant covers, and people will take advantage of artists. They will overwork artists. Like there's a lot of controversies of
yeah
people basically taking artists, reselling it, trying to take it just arbitrage. Just it's a money machine, and it's almost like an investing world, and it takes
yeah
away from the joy of art. And a lot of
Hmm.
people hate on that part of it because that unfortunately is how we make a lot of our money, is the collectability of and the joy of working with really talented, powerful artists who can make like a lot of their income just doing covers for different things because their art is that recognizable and stuff like that. Peach Momoko is a good example of
yeah
someone that just having a variant cover from her is going to bring a lot of value to your series. Her that cover itself is going to bring a lot of people who are fans of hers, but you're going to get a lot of people that are just going to buy that stuff up and that aren't necessarily fans, and they're just going to try to resell it, at a higher price, or they're going
Hmm.
to do whatever. I
Is
don't
that
know.
a
It's crazy. There's
holdover? Is that a holdover sentiment from like the late 90s, kind of when Image was formed, that era where like the collector market almost kind of sank the industry?
yeah, there's a lot of people that think we are in the same kind of happening to where the comic industry could possibly collapse in a sense if this collectability of the variant covers stops, if its momentum drops, it could stall the comic industry drastically, because that
Gotcha.
is where a lot of the money. I mean, in my personal experience, most of my money is made through the variant covers. Okay, so like if let's just say, um, if I have your original cover and then I might have a variant cover from the same artist,
Hmm.
those are like your A and B. And then you might have an homage that's, a famous movie or something. And people that are fans of that movie, they will get it. And I sell a lot of those. And that artist who might have did it, they might not be that well known, so they're cheaper, and I know that they'll sell. So when it comes to a readership or like audience base, I now sort of like that variant cover is just money on top. It's not because I sold more, like I didn't get more readers because of
Hmm.
that cover. I just made more
Gotcha.
money. So it's almost
Right.
just, it's just counterintuitive if I know that I can make money doing that, to not do it, because it's just
Right.
like sort of, it's just like I know I'll make an extra 1,000 sales just doing this
Hmm.
one thing. And then you might have another one that's a sort of a celebrity kind of thing, or just someone that's like, and it's sort of the same thing. But what
Hmm.
happened is you just overdo it, and people
Hmm.
on Kickstarter will do that to where, so through the direct market, the people hate on it because that's sort of overshadows storytelling, to where it's like they're
Hmm.
more focused on doing a million variant covers and a million offshoots and one shots and just like stuff that doesn't carry on the it takes away from the art and the story, and it's more about this business and these events or kind of thing. But in the
Yeah.
Kickstarter space, it's more like the same thing, to where people feel as if they might be um uh not frauded, but just like let down, because they might see that the main story art that they're reading is not as good as the variant cover arts that's advertised. So
Sure.
they might see in the campaign, the video and like the cover page is going to be that really great famous artist's artwork,
Hmm.
and then they're gonna have the option to get like that kind of thing, and then the interior art and the story are just not up to those standards, and they might feel a bit let down. And once again, it's just another thing where it's like it's all about the collectability and not about the story itself or the joy of
Sure.
comics or whatever.
Gotcha.
um
Okay. Hmm.
I guess it, we'll see if Daniel comes back or not, but from
He's
my,
back.
oh, he is back.
Hmm.
Yes. The internet.
uh
Sorry.
I was just gonna let you guys. I feel like I've talked too much, so you guys let me fill me in on what do you want people to know about your campaign. What do you want people to know about the story? What do you want people to know about yourself? Where can people find you? All that kit and
All that
caboodle.
jazz. Okay. Um, I think I think it's really. I'll just talk for Elliot. I think it's a really great looking book. I think it's a fun read. Um, and it's like I think it's a really fun comic. I don't think we're, and I'm really excited about what we're doing with it. I think it's been, we're really kind of, I don't know. I'm really excited about where we are. We're kind of doing that thing where we just sort of like, so we're playing with the scene right now that I'm really excited about. In issue 3 and 4, it's like we're just like following the page count, following the story, letting it kind of tell itself. Um, I think Elliot's getting really good at drawing. He already was really good, but you know what I mean. Like the pages have been, there's been like a real jump lately. I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel
I
like
will
it's
say
sort of
drawing for comics is completely different from illustration. I'll say that, and there was a learning curve for sure.
I would say the previews look amazing. I mean, you almost like outdo yourself, to where I feel like other people are gonna look at that and be like, "Oh man, we're slacking." You know, for a black and white, it's very powerful.
Well, thank you
oh,
for the kind words. Tell all your friends. Tell all your
I'll
friends.
spread the
Everyone
word.
out
Yeah,
there.
beautiful. Yeah, I think that's our biggest thing. I think our we're you know I think we're in it for the long haul. We're really, I mean, I'm really enjoying where the story is going. I think Elliot's really enjoying. Like so, for us, it's really is we're just doing that one foot in front of the other, trying to build an audience. We're trying to build up a Tenko bond. We're just, we don't have the money to kind of, you know, it's paying for itself right now, and that's really all we kind of, that's all you can kind of hope for. But you know, it would be wonderful just to sort of keep building an audience and keep getting people excited about the book. And I think it's a really fun read. So like that's the big thing. And then story wise, we think it's a really fun take on, you know, like a young teenage girl, her sister is maybe dead or missing, we don't know. And then there's just sort of, you know, we just sort of follow that and like go down fun paths. And it's like, you know, kind of like a traditional, you know, what like the Guyver or whatever, like those fun action sort of driven things, but with a lot of horror and a lot of like, either hopefully it's engaging and exciting, or there's some horror. We can kind of play either way. It can be an action scene or it can be a horror movie.
Yeah, I love that's the stuff I love.
Yeah.
The current book the main book I have out right now, Liquid Killed. It's an action horror.
Yeah.
And that leads me to my next and final question is, do you plan to shop it around Hollywood at all? Like yourself, or do you have an agent that is already trying to get at you and be like, what do you plan to do with this?
I mean, the goal right now, really, I think, is just to continue to make a good book and not get too. I have a friend, and he did a book, really lovely book called Non-Player that came out years and years ago. I don't know if you've ever seen it. His name is Nate Simpson, and he did this great book. It looks lovely. It took him 4 years to do 2 issues, and it was. And I remember when he sold the rights to the comic, and I was like, you drew this incredibly expensive comic book. I don't know if this is ever going to be a movie or whatever. And I just felt like I would rather him just continue to make the story instead of like, I don't know. For me, that's how I see it. Like our goal, I think, is to comic first. If anything else happens, I think the best way for that to happen is to sort of build it organically, get people excited about the story, because that can take forever. You know, like if you kind of were building for an IP, you know, if Jeff Smith was building Bone just to like sell it off, that never would have finished. You know, because that's been what 40 years of him trying to make a movie out of it, and it's not going to happen. So I think our goal is just to make a great comic, and then you know if something comes along like that, I think we definitely would pursue it and be open to it. But I think at the moment it's really just sort of one foot in front of the other, make a good comic, hopefully build a larger and larger audience, and kind of get it out there.
I mean, that's what I tell people. I get a lot of I do coaching work in a sense, and I get a lot of people that reach out to me that they kind of they tell me like their goal is to, I want to turn this into a movie. And I always tell them like the same thing. I'm like, if your goal is that, you have to you have to have so much passion for the project that you will not be determined or like happy until the project as a comic book is satisfied and complete. Like if your goal is to like get the movie, you're always going to be one step short because you're not engaged in the project as a story in its full. It's just like anything else to where like people can subconsciously see when something is like a passion project that was done to its full potential because for the artistic merit, that's what people love. The people creating it like had to get it out there, as opposed to something that's a business endeavor where they were just trying to do something that would sell or that they thought the audience would want. We can sort of subconsciously see into that, which leads to my conspiracy that uh, you can fall for the fakeness, and way too many people are falling for just like business corporate stories. It's outrageous. And it's just like I watch this stuff now. I'm like, there's there's so much actually really great content out there that I still can't watch everything. But I'm just like, man, how are we all falling for this stupid nonsense that's been retold over and over again that was never good the first time? But yeah, I will end on that. We've talked for a long time. I'm definitely gonna have to bring you guys on again. And so like next campaign, but yeah, and I definitely wanna just when's our lucky day is already
It's
live.
your lucky day. It's out. Your lucky
Your
day.
lucky day. Sorry.
It's on. You can rent it on Amazon or whatever. I think any platform. It's on. We have DVDs and Walmart. Um, so yeah, that's out in the world as well. So it's and then I think it's yeah. That's sort of where
So
it's at right
there's nothing I can like hype. It's not like gonna be. It's already out there, so it's not like there's a new event that I can then like be like, all right, let's talk about this now. That one's kind of done. Do you have another movie that you're working on at all that
now.
might be coming
I'm in
out?
the. It's it's early pre-production stages and all that stuff, right? So I've got a couple scripts I'm working on. But I think that's sort of like I've got a vampire script that I wrote that's about like a cult vampire. movie about two brothers and their father runs like a vampire cult and they all commit suicide.
Always
then
great.
They escape to Seattle and live in like a shitty motel. So it's sort of about their kind of like a Cain and Abel story. So that's sort of one of the things I'm working on.
Well,
But
I
I
know
think
how long these things take, so I'll get you
it's
on before that premieres. But
yeah.
yes,
But
and
yeah, I mean, if
we'll
anyone
just talk
wants to like,
about your like actual the filmmaking side because that's still a part of my channel. As much as my
yeah,
audience says they're all about the comic books, I still make the filmmaking videos, and I still want to dive more into that. So I'll make a whole separate video where we'll talk about just from start to finish that project. But until
totally.
then, thanks a lot, both of you guys, and I'll put the links to the Kickstarter and stuff in the YouTube description and stuff, and I'll probably post this by next Tuesday. I think your campaign will still be running by then, and so
I think so,
that'll
yeah.
be when it'll go live.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, and anytime you want to ask about the movie, I'll give you all the juice. I can tell you, it's been a process. It's
I'm sure. I know. I've produced
what
two
you did
films.
one.
I've produced two films at this point, both overseas in India. So my worldview of it is a lot different than others in this space. They're like in the U.S. It's just done differently. But it's still the same general process, and it
Yeah.
multi years. And I have another one that's in production right now that's in limbo. It's a nightmare. I'm still trying.
So if you're shooting in India, is it in the
It's in
native language?
Hindi. It stars
wow.
Hindi, and it's made for the Hindi market. And
Okay.
yeah, and like the current one, it was like it's one of those things where it's like halfway done, and we had a star involved, and then the star dropped out, and then our funding dropped out, and now I have a half finished film that until I get a new star, it's like not done. And
Oh wow.
anyway, that's for the next video. Thanks
Okay.
for everything, guys. Till
Thanks
next
so
time.
much. Thank you.